Hi all, this is the video that goes along with your reading and writing assignments for April 14th. So you were supposed to, for April 14th, you're supposed to read NIL pages 12 through 17. Those are posted in Blackboard. There's a folder uh, um, labeled April 14th. And inside it's got the scans of the readings, those pages. NIL again stands for Norton Introduction to Literature, which is a book that I scanned these from. So you read pages 12 through 17. You'll watch this video like you're doing now. And then you'll respond to the questions that are also in this folder, in that folder. So the readings that you had, uh, we're talking a lot about interpretation of events. The idea that it's hard to tell exactly what happened without kind of putting your own take on something. Whenever you decide to tell a story, you are making some choices about what information to include or what information to exclude. You can't tell everything that happens. If you know somebody who tries to tell you everything that happens to them, you get worn out because you're overloaded with details. Little children sometimes do this when they tell stories. They'll just tell you everything that happened at school today. They'll just run through and every little event, and you're like, just stop talking, because there's no point to this. And so if you want a story to have a point, on some level you have to choose which elements you want to include and which elements you want to exclude. And that in some ways shapes what the actual story is. So the assignment that I've given you, I want you to read those pages. One of the stories in there is called Elephant in the Land of the Blind. So you'll read that, and I've got a question about that, and I want you to talk about how that story relates to this idea. And then I want you to write two stories, rather, two stories that are two different versions of the same event. In the handout, I give you an example of, let's say that, that I fell down when I was in middle school. I fell down in the cafeteria on the first day of school. You can imagine me telling that story in a way that would be, terrible. That, I was embarrassed and humiliated and concerned that nobody would like me for the rest of the year. That's one way I could tell that. Another way that I could tell that is now that I'm older, it's been many decades since I've been in middle school, I might find it kind of funny, right? I might tell my friends, hey, let me tell you what happened to me my first day of middle school, and this is really funny. In each of those versions of the story, I might choose to include different details. So if I want to tell you how embarrassing it was, I might emphasize how everybody was laughing at me. If, on the other hand, I want to explain how funny it is, I might talk about how later on I went to class and I was still pulling food out of my hair, right? And people might think that that's going to be funny. So the same event told differently depending upon which details we have, and that's what I want you to do for this assignment. I want you to tell a story, the same basic events, but tell it in two different ways so that we feel differently about that story. And I've got some details about that assignment. And just as to back this up, another analogy that we have with this, whenever people are making films, if you're just going to decide to film something, realize that we might think sometimes, well, you filmed something, that's exactly what happened, right? If you pull out your phone and you film an event, you're just showing exactly what happened. But realize that you aren't really doing that. You are still making a choice about which details to include, right? That is, when you decide to pull out your phone changes things. Maybe if you had pulled out your phone a minute earlier, you might get a different story. Or if you pulled out your phone a minute later, you might get a different story. There's some different context that we might have depending upon when the video starts or stops. Um, but even if two people pull out their phones at the exact same time, if they are located in different places, then they're going to get different details potentially, right? Somebody on one side of the event might see one set of details, whereas somebody on another side might see another set of details. And so even though they're filming and filming exactly what happens at the exact same time, where they are changes how we might think about what happens. And that's not to mention what might happen if we decide to zoom in or zoom out, and how that might on some level change our interpretation of what's going to be going on. So be thinking about that. That's all going to be important for some ways in which we're going to look at stories for the next couple of weeks. So you've got to read those pages. You need to write about the elephant in the land of the blind, and you need to write two versions of the same story. As always, if you have any questions, just make sure to email me. And again, this assignment is due on, I'm checking my schedule here, it's due by 7 p.m. on April 14th.